Humanitarians Live, this time with Viki. Hi, Viki. Welcome
Hi,
back.
Asel. Hello, everyone. Great to be back.
Yes, so we've been talking with Viki about continuing the discussion of Big Leap, and this time we wanted to look at two elements of it. One is getting her perspective on what Big Leap she has experienced, and also like looking at your own experience of maybe you have experiences as well, and maybe you haven't really been conscious about or labeling it as such, right? But it would be good to also see how you can reverse engineer to see how you have created it. And then also the other topic is how do you know you are ready for a big leap? And then I wanted to share some perspectives that I have had recently, and then we go from there. So, Vicky, let's start with the topic of how do you know you have had a big leap, basically, and how is it for you?
Yeah, it's a very good question because what is, if we define a big leap, what is really a big leap? And I think as humanitarians, but maybe other people as well, we are very good at not recognizing our achievements. And I think this is very particular in the humanitarian world because there are so many different requirements that are put on us and so many goals and objectives that very often we have made big leaps so many times, but we don't recognize it. When we are standing where we are standing, we don't recognize this as a big leap. Maybe I would say, maybe not only necessarily because we don't admit to our own successes, or we don't recognize our own successes, but very often because people just don't take the time to revise, don't take the time to I don't know, whenever it is, often it's at the end of the year, to sit and say, okay, what was the big thing? What was my big success? And so I would say when we are talking about big leaps, and we are talking about transitioning, that out of the eight sector, definitely I do remember the moment that I had the realization what I need to do. And
Mhm.
that for me was a big leap. It was not a big leap physically, because physically I could be staying actually in the same moment, but it was a massive shift in my mind when I literally had the switch in my mind that somehow switched is that, okay, that's it.
Mhm.
I have completed my mission with the organization I was working for. I have gone through a place of gratitude and said to myself, it has been fantastic in spite of many difficulties, etc. But it was really the mental shift that has really pushed me forward, that I realized this is a big leap for me.
Yeah.
One thing that we have also mentioned, and I think it would be good to spend sometimes time on this, is intuition, tuning into our intuition. Because when we are in our intellectual minds, we, the time goes and we realize some successes, but it's really in the intuition, when we tap into our inner world, into our core, into our intuition, that will tell us, okay, you are ready for the big leap. So that's
Mm.
just few words for introduction. What about you,
Amazing.
Asel? How are you seeing this?
I was thinking that, like, how I had my big leaps in the past, especially in the humanitarian setting, and some of the things that I would call it a big leap is when I transitioned, like, from being the person who always went on temporary assignments or
Mhm,
like hopping from one place to another, basically, to being the person who's appointed and who,
mhm,
like, I don't know, things sounded very serious at the time, right? In terms of like having the career leap and then getting my managerial position and that type of thing. And the interesting part is that I have never really expected that that's my career would take me to that.
mhm,
And it's not like I was working towards it or anything. It's just
yeah,
that what I have noticed is that if I was like looking back at and reverse engineer is that some of the elements was I really loved doing what I was doing, and then I was just working to explore more how best to be efficient at doing what I'm doing. And and then I love that when big leaps, like in my mind, when they happen, they come like as a surprise or sometimes as a way of like
Hmm.
it came out of the blue, like a job offer that you never thought you would get,
Yeah.
right? Or people who you never thought would even know you would be like offering you come work with me, and then you feel like honored, and these type of big leaps I love. And I think like my goal would be for every one of us is instead of being in this space of oh I have to get the next job or like and that's also I think part of our journey, but I would love for all of us to come to this place where the job that we really aspire to or like think even maybe not really possible, but then it comes to us as an opportunity to apply for or as a way for us to even consider going for it, even though maybe we have never considered before, right? So I love these type of big leaps, and I would love for people to think about how you have had it. I'm assuming many of us have had this experience, and then looking at how you have created it, because I think oftentimes, like Vicky was saying, that we're so good at dismissing things or not recognizing how we've created the things that we have, or we just like attribute it to luck, right? And saying that oh, it was just lucky, or this person just wanted to do me a favor, whatever it is. But think about from the other perspective is that if you weren't ready for it, if you didn't have the capacity and the competences for it, I don't think you would be offered that opportunity either, right? It's not like we're going to give such opportunities to people who are not ready for it. I think so. That's why I just want like to offer this to everyone thinking about maybe you have had many big leaps in the past and just getting curious how you have created it and getting curious as to what was your self concept of that person back in the day who have created it.
Yeah.
And that could always make this shift and jump that I love, where it feels like, oh my God, it happened overnight. But of course,
Yeah.
it never does happen overnight, right? So that's why I love to talk about like the how we can be ready for it, or how you know when you're ready for it
Yeah.
as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah, and this is a very important point you're saying, because sometimes it may come as a surprise, as you say, the job or the
Mm,
realization. But actually, when you, as you call it, reverse engineer, when you go back
yeah,
and look at the steps way before this big leap happened, you will have seen that you have been preparing, whether
yeah,
it was a conscious preparation or sometimes even subconscious preparation,
yeah,
whether it was a training, whether you were attending meetings, whether it was
yeah,
certain networking that you were doing, or whatever it is, you have been preparing for a while.
Mhm.
So I think it's very to recognize this, and realize what has led you to this big leap that seems
Yes.
sometimes as coming out of nowhere. And second thing I like to also suggest is that not to approach the big leap with a sense of expectation or a sense of
Yeah,
attachment. I think it's
I
usually in
know.
the moments when we don't attach expectation of a result, that we say we work diligently, we go, we learn the lessons, but we don't stress out extremely expecting that now the big leap is going to happen, now the big job is going to happen. I'm not saying it has never happened, but my experience is that, if you give it a sort of flow, if you flow and take it as it is, the chances are that the big leap is going to come earlier than if you really really cling onto that.
Yes, I I want to add to that one other element that I noticed recently that come up is which is entitlement, and I think that could be another killer of big
Yeah.
leaps. I mean, I have seen it so many times in my own life,
Mm,
and I see now with some of my clients is that we have this belief that now we should be over this, or we should be just
yeah.
like we shouldn't be doing this type of things, right? And therefore, I think what that does is that it like starts confining us in ways that we don't realize it. And then we start showing up in a way that, like, well, we know everything by now kind of energy, or we're not going to learn anything anymore energy. I don't know what that is there behind it, but anyway, that I think makes us maybe not being meticulous in certain things, right? Especially, I know my own entitlement when it comes. I tend to be on the surface instead of going into details, instead of learning, like, what is it there I need to learn. So that's why that could be another way that stops big leaps from happening. So let's get into the topic of how do you know you're ready for it, or like maybe the other version of could be like, what are the signs to look out for, how to
Mhm.
work towards it? Because I want to believe that there are certain things that we can still achieve by pursuing them. It's just like you said, not to attaching to them, but staying curious and working towards the things that you would otherwise avoid doing it, maybe. So that's why I would love, like, to share some of my experience of how getting ready for it could look like. I would love to hear yours
Mhm.
first, Vicky. How do you
Yeah.
see it?
Yeah, thank you. The question of being ready, or how do, or are you ever really ready? So
Mm,
here I would like to also contribute that, sometimes many years ago, I talked to a friend who, and this is on another example, and it was example of having, I don't have children, but there was a discussion about having children, and the person said, but you're never ready, you're never 100% ready. So I think for
mm,
I would also mention this parallel, that really being 100% ready
yeah, that
for
doesn't exist.
thing, yes, it doesn't exist. But what exists is real, and here I believe this is really important, or at least was very relevant for me, is the inner sense, the inner calling, and tuning into my intuition and feeling really in my heart, or spirit, or whatever we want to call it, that the time has come, that I
Mm,
actually intellectually and mentally was not sure what exactly. I had a vague idea what I was going to do. I didn't have any financial plan, or like vague financial plan, so to speak. But I felt very deep inside that this is the time to change, and I felt
mm,
I also was in a state of mind of no fear, a state of mind, a state
mm,
of heart of no fear, that it's fine. And I have to say, it reminded me of another big leap that I felt the same with another big leap, and there was a big leap that when I was when I was applying for university. So literally, probably 30 years before that, I probably had some big leaps between, but this is really something I recall the moment, I recall the feeling, and it was the same feeling when I was applying for my university, and this was long time ago. I was 17 years old, and I had this deep call and intuition that told me
mm,
this is where you're going, and I have never regretted it. It was probably one of the best decisions of my life. So I
mm,
recall both of the situations, the best decisions of my life, even
yeah.
though they, as you mentioned, seemed, for outside world, they seemed very counterproductive, and in part or counterintuitive, where after 20 years of international aid work, I decided not to stay where I was, or not to pursue or go for higher posts, but and return back to my homeland and really start life there, with whatever was available there. So I would summarize it, for me, really connection with myself, intuition, calling, mission, when there is this resonance with some sort of service, some sort of calling, some sort of purpose.
Mm.
I don't know if this resonates with you, if there is similar experience you've had.
I was thinking the same, is that I think one of my prevalent emotions at the time was that I want to be doing this no matter what. And I think this was like a big change and big, like maybe the conviction that allowed me to change
Yeah.
without much drama at the time, even though drama did come afterwards. So that's like, I feel like drama is eventual somewhere along the line. But even in the drama, I remember like thinking I rather want to be doing this than anything else. And I think that was like a big shift for me. The other one that I had recently that surprised me so much was that it was filled with an anxiety, and that I didn't expect, because what happened was that I felt like I had this big leap, and then afterwards I started feeling all this anxiety, uh, a lot of other feelings that are like close to anxiety, like fear, and a lot of this started coming up, and I also realized that it's a bit like my, I don't know, identity shift found its new foundation. It felt
Mhm.
like it was a bit like wobbly, and then my like nervous system was reacting, and I think the anxiety was coming from that. But anyway, this is obviously my reading of this, right? So that's why I wanted to offer that big leaps, I think, may come also in waves where you have lots of different emotions all together, as if like you are holding like so many different opposite to each other feelings. At least this is how I've experienced it several times, like as if I'm holding like fear at the same time feeling like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. And like, even though fear and all the other feelings were there, but knowing that this is the right direction I'm going for,
Mhm.
right? Knowing that this is how I'm growing into my next level. And I think that was part of it as well. So that's why I thought, um, for anyone who may be in this space of exploring how big leap could look like, it may also look like as if like lots of different emotions are coming up, but there will always be like what Vicky was saying, this deep or some version of this feeling that tells you, no, 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 this is the right way to go. Even though your fear brain will like scream and say, oh my God, is this the right one? Da, da, da. But then there's this feeling of, no, 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 this is the right direction, right? So that's what, like, inner knowing or intuition, whichever way you call it. And I felt like that was also available. That's another way of big leaping, where all these emotions come up that you may not have expected, all those uncomfortable emotions that may come up.
Yeah, yeah. So as I'm hearing, we had somewhat different experiences.
Yeah,
So I think it really shows that that it may come in different shapes and form, probably for everyone.
yeah,
The common denominator I'm hearing is intuition or connecting to oneself, and also different emotions accompanying it. So I think
yeah,
this is important to mention. And I also wanted to mention that I think in the moment we are probably not realizing this is a big
yeah,
leap, or we wouldn't call it. We are probably just feeling is that this is something is shifting, something is different, but we probably wouldn't call it the
yeah,
big leap. So I think it is probably often not one point or one exact point, but maybe a period of time
yeah.
refer to.
I think that's how I experience definitely, is that it's not one like day, or it's more like a wave. The way I like feel it is like a wave that's like shifting and changing. And then, and you know, the point is not to whether you call it a big leap or not. The point is like noticing how you are shifting from being here to being there, that you thought maybe like that I thought oftentimes that it would be incremental, but instead of being incremental of growth, it becomes like a jump kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And that's what I have experienced recently. And I was thinking the same, as I was transitioning from being this person who was in the temporary assignment to being the person who was appointed and started this fixed term contract and managerial role, and it all felt like a very serious thing now. And then I remember also having lots of anxiety about it, and then like lots of other feelings that come up. in the process of going through that state, right? So that's why I feel like that's also like one of the ways that you could experience it. And one other thing that maybe is important to mention is that I would always look out for like whatever the feeling that you want to avoid and instead get curious about it. And that could always invite you to
Yeah.
get to that place. And not from this like suffering perspective, I mean, but from this, oh yes, this is like the opportunity that I'm shying away from, or this is, I'm thinking like it's too high for me, or it's, I
Mhm.
could never do this, or whatever the thing we tell ourselves, right? But instead of like being in that space, get curious as to, oh, what if I could do that job, or what if I could go to that promotion, or what if I could apply for that thing, or what if I could actually transition to something totally different, and then getting curious and allowing yourself to be in that space, I think could always be like an invitation to explore more what's behind it, because I think our curiosity always invites us to places that we're actually capable of doing, but we have not really consciously recognized it, maybe. And therefore, we like the first reaction always may be, oh no, I can't, I could never really do that, or I could never, da da da, right? Instead, allowing yourself to explore what if you could and how could that look like.
Yeah, yeah. I think the statements, as you mentioned, this I could never, or it, I will never do, or these are sort of statements that often, as you say, it's important to dig underneath them to understand what is behind them, because there is always an answer for us
Yeah.
underneath.
Yes, exactly. So I think what is no, I just I'm looking at my notes. Yeah, one other thing that I think could be like interesting for anyone who's making a big leap, conscious in the sense of, okay, want to like shift identities, because that's what I was talking about the other time as well, is that one of the things that you consider is what is a common emotion that's like, if you want to shift from one identity to another, if you want to be from humanitarian or non-humanitarian, or from a person who always does this to a person who always or now does something else, what is their one uncomfortable emotion that you need to be feeling to go through and explore it? And I think
Yeah,
allowing space for that uncomfortable emotion could open up lots of doors that I feel like many of us are not willing to do, because we just believe that it's going to be so hard or so difficult, and therefore like look at one emotion that you might be wanting to avoid the most. Like in my case, it was a shame,
hmm,
um,
okay,
of failing, or shame of not being able to make it, or whatever it is, right? So, and as soon as you get comfortable looking at that emotion, that may also open up lots of doors for you to say, oh, if I can experience this, then
yeah.
it's not really difficult to change,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What would you say,
It's
Viki?
important, yes, what you're saying. And in particular, what's coming to my mind is what I'm hearing very often is that I am a humanitarian and I can't do anything else.
Yes, exactly.
And I cannot imagine doing anything else, and I don't want to be doing anything else. And I think that's a great statement.
Yeah,
There is no problem, but what is underneath that? Because when we start just exploring and really being curious about what is underneath that, we can say that you can be a humanitarian in any setting. Because what is the humanitarian? We are serving a community, we are serving a
yeah,
group of people, we are doing a project for them, and all these things are available practically anywhere. And very often I hear also, I can never be a banker. And that's fine. That's fine. But again, that's a very sort of a judgmental, very strict
yeah,
statement. So what is underneath? Fine, you don't want to work for a bank, but
yeah,
also banks are donors, or all this is all part of one humanitarian work. A lot of people work in partnerships. So let's just dig into that and unpack it, what it really means. Because
Yes.
so what I want to say, these kinds of statements, these kinds of blatant and judgmental statements, I really invite everyone who is thinking this way to start digging underneath. What is it that I want more concretely, and what is it that I really don't want? Really, really digging into concrete task examples, so that we are not really operating with this very strict judgmental sentences or visions that are not helpful. Uh,
Yes. And I wanted to actually say in that regard is that recently I was also coaching someone, and one of the things that we worked through it is by focusing on the skills rather than on the I'm not going to be a banker. And I love this because I don't know why many of us have this like judgmental attitude towards bankers. But anyway, that's another topic. So with my client, we were working through like what are the skills that you already have that you want to then do it somewhere else, right? That could be another way of looking at it. If you're having difficulty saying like I could never do this or I can never whatever, but just like getting curious as to like being curious as to what are the skills you have now and whether they can be applied somewhere else. And don't say that no one wants my skills or whatever the things, because again, this is coming to the
yeah.
black and white and judgmental place that we cannot get anything out of it. So, right. So that's why I love what you said about we always can find something to work with if we are open minded, open hearted. But we can always close up ourselves down by saying, oh, I can never, whatever. And that's, I think, not useful.
Mhm.
So, anything else, Vicky, that we haven't mentioned in terms of this big leap topic?
I want the last thing I would like to mention is really being or speaking or thinking from the position of scarcity, which often humanitarians sort of stress humanitarians do, and anyone else does.
Yeah.
Something you indicated, nobody wants my jobs. I only can do that. So again, this is an unhelpful phrase. So I would always encourage to shift the sentence in your mind to say, I have this to offer. And we talk about skills, talk about loads of other things. So those, I would say, are the things that are useful for big leap and being and in the big leap and transitioning.
Yes. And also, like, allow your mind the idea of what if you can actually create big leaps and how could that look like from a very curious place, from like abundant place of what if you could just be that person who could like shift yourself to the another identity or an additional identity or
Yeah.
to another stage or level, whatever the way you call it, right? What if you could actually be that person and how could you do that? And one of the ways that I love doing this to myself, just to explore my own brain's capacity of what's possible. And and that's like an experiment you can do with yourself to see, okay, what are the ways you have done it already and what are the ways you could be doing it and how could that look like? And then exploring that option as well. And and I always want to think of like, what if we are humanitarians are always supposed to be people who get lots of amazing job offers instead of us applying for it. I know it's like a fairyland that I'm talking about for many of us, but I'm just like allowing myself to think, what if that could be the truth in the future? What if everyone wanted to come and like offer us the jobs that we never thought we would even go for, simply because we are so like passionate about what we do and great about what we do that everyone wants to work with us, right? So that could be an
Yeah.
opportunity to explore. Okay, having said that, thank you, Vicky, so much for being here.
Yeah.
and talking to everyone about Big Leap. And thank you, everyone. And if you have questions or want to get coaching, let us know.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we'll see you next Thursday.
Absolutely. Thank you, Asel. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.
Yes. Bye.